So here's the first one. So we have this app. It works as we expect it to work. I should have lower. After we have crossed the 100, it immediately says you won. But let's see how that is being done and why we don't want it to be done in this way. So if we look at the code here, we see you probably ended up with a state very similar to this one, the counter, an increase and a cost. I think cost is maybe probably never changing. Oh no, it is changing it. So that means that the cost will be more expensive as time goes on. As you earn more, you have to pay more for that, which is a cool approach. But let's look at here. So the handle click. So this handle click function will be called whenever the button here is called, whenever the button is clicked, right? And let's look at what this function is doing. So it brings in the counter and the increase from the state, and then it's going to check if the counter is greater or equal to 99. Then we create an h1 element that says you win or you won, and a button that says play again, which will have the event listener play again attached to it. So when you click, you restart the game. And then after that, remember this, if we are above 99 points, after that is calling React.render to show the you win and attach it to the one div. So if we look at the HTML, you didn't submit the HTML, but if I could just add it here. So basically, what Sergio has here is that HTML. I think I can just add it. He has a few other divs here. One. The other one is again.
No, I didn't put the divs there.
You didn't put the divs here?
No, I put them with the normal HTML divs.
What do you mean? Oh, this is the HTML file.
Yeah, now that you say it, I think I put it in the app.js
Oh,
file.
okay. I see. We'll still work the same. So you have it here.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, we can see those two divs here. Right. So this works as we expect, but this is doing something that we should avoid when we're working with React, which is touching the DOM manually with like get element by ID. And on top of that, we're rendering basically multiple React apps, or we're basically so when we're dealing with React, we only have one React DOM that render in index.js right here, because this is going to be like the gateway for our app. We only need one. In here, I think the consequences of like having something like this are a little bit like obscure, because let's say, and I feel like I don't even know exactly like all the ins and outs of like having multiple React DOM renders, but I can think of maybe if we have like elements with the same name or the same IDs, then React could get confused as to where did I render this from? Was it from the main app or from the you win component? So we don't want to render stuff directly like this. What we have is the user modifies the state through the button, and then, if you remember, with the set state, it will change the state, and the change in the state fires another render. And in this render is where we will show something differently to the user. So here, a way in which we could get rid of this is first. And we could even use these things that you created here, right? So the goal is whenever we're above our threshold, display a U1 message, right? And we want to do that like in an H1 and the button. So first of all, let's take these two. Let's take these two to the render function. In the return, let's do it. Maybe let's do it here. I'm gonna just leave them here. I'm gonna get rid of this, the DOM manipulation stuff. And then there is actually like multiple ways of doing this. So I'm gonna get rid of the if statement. So this function will only be in charge of increasing the counter. But the check for the state we're gonna do in the render. So what we can do is, let's get rid of this if statement. In fact, this if statement, we're gonna need it in the render function. Let me put it here. Then let's clean this up. Like that. And then here, what we want to do is display something differently when we are above that threshold, right? So what we can do is, we know that setting the state, like increasing that counter, is the thing that at some point will make us cross the threshold. And we keep in mind that whenever you set the state, render this call again. What you can do is, the set state will just keep increasing the counter. After that, the render is called. In the render, we will say, okay, check if the state is above 99, then I don't want to return like my divs or my buttons to keep increasing. I want to return my U1 message. So that's basically what we're going to do here. So what we're going to do is, if the counter is above 99, then return this. Maybe on a div. Right? Otherwise, return the rest of my app, basically, which is the buttons to keep increasing, etc. So let's look at to see how this looks like. Let me just lower this so that we don't spend 10 minutes clicking. Just click. So remember that every time I click this button, set state is called, the state is updated, and render is called again. That means that on every single click, I'm checking if we're above that threshold. And then we show the U1, you play again, and so on. So this is like, you could think of this as sort of conditional rendering, right? Like if one condition is met, then you show something. Until that condition is not met, as long as that condition is not met, you show something else. So this is a way in which we could approach this and get rid of that like DOM manipulation directly. Mm-hmm. Questions about this? So if you did DOM manipulation because of this, with document query selector or element.addEventListener, make sure that this makes sense, and if not, just reach out with questions. Mm-hmm. The other thing here is that for the reload, and this is something that not only Sergio did, is for that button to reset here, that we have here. So whenever you click this button, we're gonna call this function called play again. What this function is doing is this, which is reloading the page, basically, reloading the location, which is not ideal because what happens if we don't really, so this will reload the entire page, right? And the goal, like one of the advantages of React is that you don't have to reload the entire page whenever you want to show something different, right? If our app was big, this would reload our entire app. Imagine reloading the entire Facebook app when you open somebody's message. That's what sort of something like this will do. So the way we could do it is what we want is if we know that the state is always about like this state represents literally the state in which your app is, right? And we know that when we're increasing, then there's a counter that is going up. And we also have a check that if that counter goes over 99, then we're going to show something. We're going to show the you won and the play again button. So what we could do is like reset our state. And because resetting our state calls render again, that's why this is like very important. Like once you get this, you're going to be fine with React. What we can do, what this function is going to do is just reset the state, set the counter back to 0. Then setting the counter back to 0, because it's changing the state, is going to call render again. In the render, we have that if statement. If it's above our threshold, show that you won. But now the state will be 0, which is not above our threshold, which will return the rest of our app, basically. So this function, we just need to re-implement it. It's going to say this.set state. And let's reset our state. So I want the counter to go back to 0. I want the increase to go back to 1. And I want the cost to go back to 10. Thank you. So let's see how this works. One, play again. And we're not reloading the entire page. That means if we have other components on the side, like a message feature, that thing will not be affected. Right? Only this component will be rendered. So, questions or comments about this? Yes?
I'm trying to remember why I did it. It's clearly not doing anything. I guess you can just simply set the state. I declared the variables again, the counter increase cost above it, but it didn't never mind.
What do you mean like above?
It's grayed out, so it's not actually using them.
That's correct. Yeah, it's not really using them. When you're doing something like this, we're gonna see it again today, like resetting the state. What we do often is in here in the constructor, we could just add another property called this.initial state that is equal to this. In fact, I'm gonna cut this from here. Put this here. The initial state and then this.state is just equal to this.initial state. So then here, instead of repeating all this thing, I could just say, oh, I just want to reset my state. So the new state is going to be this.initial state. So I sort of like define, this is my initial state. I know that at some point I want to go back to it. So I set my state, my actual state, to be equal to that initial state. That initial state is not special. Like this name could be anything. But that state is special. So I initialize my state to just be equal to my initial state.
Just put that in the function. Say the function.
Say that again?
You just put that in the function.
Oh, this function? Yes, you could put it in the button. The problem with that is that the function will be redefined every time render is called. In this case, we only define this function once. So the recreating of the function is like a minor performance advantage. Yeah. Yeah.
I missed the code where the play button was back, so there's no button.
Where the play button was back, meaning the increase.
No, when you put down, it goes back to this. Like, where is that code?
Yeah. So if we look at this, so this button has an event listener attached to it. This is this button. So our render basically has two paths. Let me see. So basically, our render has two paths because we could think of it as having two paths because it's going to return two different things depending on this condition. So if it's greater, if the counter is greater than our threshold, in this case 20, I want to display U1. This one. And if, or as long as our counter is less than 20, we display the play buttons, right? So if we go above that threshold, then we display our U1 and the reset button, and then that button has this function attached to it for the onClick event, which means that whenever that button is clicked, this function will be called. If we look at this function, then this is what this is doing. The play again function is just resetting the state, basically. Reset. So this is the code that is making it reappear, because when you change the state from the counter to be at your threshold, let's say 20, to be back at 0, then that causes another render, and the render will check this condition again, and then returning the correct thing. I think I saw a hand in the back. Yeah. That's correct, yes. Anytime you're setting state, that's causing renders. That is causing the render function to be called. And this sort of loop is the most powerful tool in React.
You have to define this initial state at the beginning to make it work in the middle, or that's not necessary?
That's a good question. You're saying, like, if I move this one up, will it work here? Is this what you're saying?
Just get rid of that line.
This line?
And just make this state that you had before.
That's correct, yeah, but so I did this. Yes, that'll work, but then I have to repeat myself here, specifying all the keys again. In this case, if I have something that I call the initial state, right, that will remain at 0.
Will it work like that? No, because you can't define the state.
That's correct. It won't work because state. So you cannot read property counter of null. This is React is searching for the state property, and it cannot find it. I don't know. Maybe this might be something that's related. Maybe you had a spelling mistake in state. So this is why like the state property on a React component is very special. Let me see if this will work. Yeah, this even though this wouldn't work, because if you remember that JavaScript reads like top to bottom, the constructor gets called, and the constructor will set the state property to be equal to the initial state. But at this point, at this line, there is no such thing called initial state. So that's why I put this line at the bottom here. So I first define my initial state and then my actual state. Now it works. Yep. Don't reload the entire page. Peter and Isabella.
Can you go back, so you just scroll to where you have the initial state now?
If it's
Or
this,
yeah. Can you scroll up a little bit?
I wouldn't need this. So it's just the constructor. Just, like if we remember that classes are blueprints for objects, and that we basically can add as many properties as we want. Then in here, I'm just adding another property called the initial state. Why? Because I know that at some point I want to go back to it.
And that removes like the H1 and the button also?
Oh no, what removes the H1 and the button is this if statement being checked as a consequence of me hitting the button.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, Savita.
Why do you have to call it initial state and go back to it? Why can't you just go back to the state?
So why didn't name it initial state?
Yeah, like when in play again, where it says
Uh-huh.
This dot set state. Why can't you just put this dot state instead of this dot initial state?
Oh, I see. That's because this dot state will be when the counter is like at 20, right? Well, what I want to do is, let's say that our threshold is 20 or 10 in this case. So basically we have two objects. Let's see if I can draw it in here. So we have the state, and for this case, I'm just gonna simplify it to like only the counter, 0, and then we have the initial state. Zero. Now, the state in React, this one, when I click the button, this counter will be going up. So it will go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 as I'm clicking the button. And the initial state will not change, right? This one remains. But what I want to do is to, at some point, once I cross the threshold, I want to turn my state back onto 0. So I can manually set it, or if I use the initial state, I can just say, oh, I want my current state, the one that is causing the read render, or where I'm keeping the counter, the actual counter to go back to 0. So I just set it back to the initial state. Does that make sense? Cool. There was another question around here. Yes.
Is there any problem with the if statement in the render by making that function? Is that a problem?
Wait, what do you mean making it a function like this?
Yeah, just making that a function and calling it a function.
Oh, yeah, no, that's actually good. Yeah, we could have a function, say display winning page or display winning components, and then you just call it here. Yeah. Cool. So those are some of the React Native patterns that we want to avoid. Manipulating the DOM directly, like with query selector or element, getting element by ID, reloading the window, etc. So let's take a 5-minute break to see today's topics, which is how to deal with forms in React. So go grab water, stretch.
I'll try to keep track of how many clicks